businesses don't need the same footprint they used to sell goods. They have on time, delivery and demand. People are buying more online. And so we really are kind of overstocked in commercial space and commercial property, and we're understocked in residential property.
Welcome back to the Talk Midland podcast. My name is Logan Richetti with Modern Realty. Today I have Jacob Kain, Assistant City Manager for the City of Midland. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We met recently at a real estate investor meetup group where you were the keynote speaker and you took some time out of your evening to help the local real estate community understand more about the city, the city's plans, the city's desires, zoning regulations, all that stuff. And I really appreciate you doing that.
That's my pleasure.
So, I'm a real estate guy. I have a lot of real estate related questions today, but
Sure you do.
We were talking about pickleball before we started, and all the different things that the city is involved with. But
Absolutely.
Before we start, can you just tell us a little bit more about your role in the city and what that looks like?
Sure. So I work primarily in some of the development focused areas of the city. So providing oversight for the building department through building inspection and housing licensing programs. We do flood permitting and oversight of our floodplain planning functions. So master planning, day-to-day zoning administration, grant programs and oversight, and then also engineering functions. So street reconstruction projects, maintenance work, signs and signals. So a pretty broad swath of some of the public facing efforts of the city, a lot of citizen interface, a lot of really interesting stuff that we get to work on every day. And then other things as assigned. So spend a lot of time. We work with a lot of boards. So a lot of folks that are volunteering to serve the community through various functions, and then work real closely with city council to help them to realize their goals for the community.
I was driving down the road the other day, and one of the roads was being repaved, and the person I was driving with said, "How do they pick which roads get repaved? How do you plan for repaving roads in a city this big?"
So we spend a lot of time looking at our strategy for maintaining our assets. We obviously have a very extensive inventory of infrastructure in the city, and maintaining it is a challenge. We have a very short construction season in Michigan. Infrastructure ages quickly, and so you want to keep it in the best condition possible. So in terms of prioritization, we do look at what is in most need. So, just rating streets. So that's one thing we do is we do what's called PASER ratings, where we actually go out every year. We evaluate the surface conditions, numerically rate them 1 to 10. And that gives us kind of a snapshot across the city of what the street network looks like. There's different things we can do depending on those ratings. And so I know one thing that we'll hear from the community is, you spent some money over here and this street wasn't really that bad. Why'd you do that? Well, part of the reason we're kind of shifting our focus to doing things on maybe not the worst street, but maybe some of the better streets, is to keep them better longer. So the longer we can put off having to do a full reconstruction, it saves the city money. It saves drivers and users of the street from the residents from the inconvenience of having their street under reconstruction. And we can get more out of that initial investment in that roadway. So I'll use an example, Sweet Avenue from East Ashman to Wheeler Street. We're reconstructing that this summer. That road, unfortunately, didn't get a lot of proactive maintenance from the last time it was reconstructed, which was just about a little bit less than 20 years ago. And so that was really a lesson learned looking at that and going, that street should have lasted longer. So we're trying to be more proactive, seal coating streets, filling in those cracks, doing those mill and overlay projects so that we can avoid having to do the more expensive treatments until later, if we can defer them longer. So that saves us money over the long run. It helps us spread our money out across the city because we can do more of those projects at a more cost-effective manner, and ultimately pick and choose when we do the reconstructions where we have to do them. And as opposed to having that be our primary approach to our street projects. But we take input from the public, so we get a lot of inquiries about streets. In addition to our ratings, we coordinate with other entities, so we have to look at what's under the street too, and sometimes that drives our decisions. If there's a water main that needs to be replaced, the street's getting replaced too. So those guide some of our decisions as well. And then we might have grant opportunities, things that'll help us to make a decision if we've got a good fit for a project for a grant opportunity. We might pursue that, and that might move it up the list if we have an opportunity to leverage some outside funds.
Very interesting. All right, one of the questions I've been dying to ask you about is the site of the former Holiday Inn. And I don't know everything about it, but I've been reading through the papers over the last couple of years. There's
Yep.
been some legal disputes between the owner and not following some codes and getting in trouble
Yep.
and things of that nature. Without getting too political down that rabbit hole, I guess my question to you is, now that that site is gone,
Yep.
what does the future hold for it?
So there's a lot of opportunity there. It was certainly a very long process to remediate past conditions where we had unsafe structures. Those had to be removed, the site restored. That took many years. We're in about the best place with that property that we've been as a community in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It does have a new owner, so there were legal issues with prior ownership. There is a new owner for the site. That new owner does have intentions on developing the property. We've been working to make sure that it's well positioned to be redeveloped. So
Mm-hmm.
looking at what the zoning allows, looking at what the site can adequately contain, what makes sense there, given the dynamics at the interchange, at that intersection. It's high profile, high congestion. And I think from those conversations, very early conversations with that new owner, I think that there's going to be some great things happening there that'll help bring the tax base back there, put that property to good productive use, and make it an attractive part of the city again.
Okay, so some of the dynamics there at play are the City of Midland benefits from new development in that there's new tax revenue generated from buildings and structures that pay taxes because they exist. And so from that standpoint, the city has a vested interest in wanting to encourage the right kind of development, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so therefore developers have the ability to envision, the highest and best use for a site. And then they come to the city office, like they come to visit with you and planning and engineering and other departments inside the city building, and they share their thoughts and their vision for the building or for the plan. And then your team provides input right out of the gate.
Absolutely. So our preference, as much as possible, is to be involved at the early stages of a project. That helps us to understand what someone's trying to accomplish and helps us get them to where they want to go. So if there are obstacles in the way, if there are things that we can help with, whether it's with financing and making a project, pencil out, to regulatory, changes that we can make to help with a project, or just simply being at the table so that we can make sure the process goes really smoothly, so that we're not wasting time, we're not having to double back on anything. If we can get somebody, good information up front and work with them kind of hand in hand until their project's complete, the projects are usually more successful when we're able to work together. But we certainly, we want to encourage investment in Midland. We want to create opportunity for people. We want to make sure that the needs of the community can be met. And so we want to create those opportunities so that people can meet those needs. The city meets, we meet some of the needs of our residents, but we can't meet everybody's needs on our own. And there's lots of things that we need others to do to meet those needs. We're not providing, places to dine out. We need folks to take the initiative to create those businesses, and we want to be supportive of that.
What are the needs of Midland right now in terms of housing and other developments? What do we need?
Well, housing and a lot of it. So that is something, having just gone through a master plan process and in the late stages of a new housing study for the community, we know there's tremendous need for housing. Our populations continue to grow, not growing rapidly, but it's still growing slowly, which is great. But that and other demographic trends have led us to really need a lot more housing than we have, and to, in a lot of cases, need different types of housing than we've historically needed.
Mm-hmm.
So even though our population hasn't changed dramatically over time, household sizes are much smaller than they used to be. The way people live is just different. Our older population is growing. And so the type of housing that fit the prototypical Midland family in 1970 isn't necessarily going to fit the prototypical household in Midland in 2025 or 2045. And so that's one of the things we're working on, is creating more opportunities for housing development within the city thinking about how can you build something different in Midland that maybe we've seen before, but that fits the needs of our residents today and in the future.
Well, speaking of which, you mentioned at our last meetup there were some changes to the way that zoning was approved or approvals are brought down or zoning regulations. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So we are coming out of our master planning process. One of the things that was identified is that we need to modernize our zoning code. So our zoning code was last substantially updated in 2005, but really a significant part of our zoning code dates back to 1969.
Wow.
So if you think a lot of things have changed over 55 years, and so we're taking a close look at our regulatory structure to make sure that it's producing the kind of outcomes that the community needs and expects. One of the things we looked at is within our commercial areas. So just in the last 10 to 15 years, the way people shop and buy things has changed radically. And so the businesses don't need the same footprint they used to sell goods. They have on time, delivery and demand. People are buying more online. And so we really are kind of overstocked in commercial space and commercial property, and we're understocked in residential property. We also know that people like the convenience of being near things, and that's something that Midlanders over generations have expressed. They like having that Lalonde's down the street. That's a huge asset to them. They enjoy that. It's part of their lifestyle that they appreciate. And folks, again, in our recent process expressed they like that too. And so we've introduced the ability to have residential units in our commercial areas across the city. Previously, it was only certain areas of the city. So that opens up that opportunity for somebody to mix some uses on a property, to reactivate a vacant commercial property with residential uses, or to think just strategically about what's the highest and best use of this property across a broader spectrum of uses than maybe just it was retail and it must remain retail. So we're confident. We're seeing early signs. These are changes that we're in the midst of a multi-phase project. The first round approved back in March, so it's still very early, but we're getting good responses from property owners and developers who are seeing those opportunities and appreciating that they have the flexibility to respond to the market more directly than they could prior.
And where are some of those opportunities right now that come to mind?
Sure. So the city was already flexible in terms of residential uses in like our downtown and in Center City along South Saginaw Road. South Saginaw Road corridor really recently, so kind of a test case for doing this. Now, the Midland Mall area, Joe Mann Boulevard to the north side of the city, our North Saginaw Road corridor, places that have traditionally been more oriented around car-based commercial development, now permit housing as well. We also tried to reduce some of the regulatory hurdles to creating housing in other areas like our office service area. The office service market's another place where office use has changed. There's more working remote. People's needs are different. Most organizations are finding that they don't need the office footprint that they used to. And so how can we think more strategically about those places? So in some cases, it's just rather than requiring a conditional use permit, rather than requiring an elongated public process, we've made things allowed by right. So come in, the site plan or apply for your building permit, and you can move forward with your project without that uncertainty of a public process. Because we know through this master plan, this very public process, very engaging process, that the community acknowledges we have a tremendous need for housing. They want their kids and grandkids to be able to stay here. And then to be able to do that, they're going to need a place to live. And so this is going to set us up to create that future that people want to see.
Okay. So when you talk about office space zoning into residential, I'm thinking of 1510 Bayless Street, which
Sure.
is a new development coming up in the pipeline, as you know, which is
absolutely
exciting. And so that's an example of a parcel of land that's technically zoned for office space. It does have a commercial office on it, but there's 6 acres over there of prime residential potential
Absolutely.
for development. And so the city is in encouraging of that, bringing in more housing there as opposed to leaving it just office space when we already have a little bit of a surplus of office as it is.
Absolutely. So that is a case where actually our office service district already was permissive of multifamily housing and has been for a very long time.
Oh.
And so it's really subtle tweaks to those regulatory structures. If you think of zoning as kind of like a staircase, so we have agricultural districts where, you'd expect to see pretty low density activities. You might even have farm animals, things of that nature, up to our regional center district, our formerly regional commercial district, where you have things like the mall. you have fast food restaurants, you have car dealerships, some pretty intensive uses.
Hmm.
Really looking at as we kind of go up that staircase, what kinds of uses come with it. So rather than having things really separated out as much as they've been in the past, how can we kind of blend those steps together into kind of more of a ramp than a staircase,
Hmm.
so that you allow more flexibility? Maybe that site, maybe 1510 Bayless' highest and best use is office service. That's allowed. Maybe it's residential. That's also allowed. Maybe it's a mix of both. Rather than prescribing what that market looks like, it gives that flexibility for that site to adapt. And it might adapt over time. It might be
Hmm.
residential for a period of time and then transition to office, or vice versa. The code is really being adjusted to allow for that to happen over time. So it could be really more organic. That's really how Midland developed for a very long time, is there wasn't a lot of municipal control. That can create problems too.
Hmm.
But kind of trying to find that happy medium where you create the opportunities, you let the market kind of figure some of those questions out, and you create that adaptability over time, so that as the market can change slowly, and it can change, as as a real estate agent and broker,
Hmm.
overnight. The market can change. Municipal rules don't usually change overnight. So
Sure.
if we can build that adaptability in, I think we set ourselves up for long-term success.
All right, you also mentioned some of the land over on Commerce Street, and that piqued my interest because I drive through there all the time, and there are several parcels that have been for sale for a while.
Sure.
What would the city like to see in that corridor? And then also, as you pass through there, you get over to the northeast side of town, Jefferson and Commerce.
Hmm.
There's some farmland areas, and I'm not sure which one, but I believe that the Midland Public Schools was identifying those areas as a potential site for a new school had that bond passed, which of course it didn't, but it might come up again. So that northeast side of town and that Commerce corridor, what does the city have in mind for that area?
So that area is identified and set up primarily to be mixed use. So in line with what we heard from the community, there's a lot of desire for housing, but people also want to see walkability. They appreciate uses being thoughtfully mixed together. So in a considerate way where they relate well to each other. And there's a lot of opportunity for that. That's a huge opportunity space for the community to expand and meet a variety of needs. And so
Hmm.
I would anticipate we could see anything up there as further to the east, probably primarily single family or lower density attached housing. And as you move closer to the mall and Joe Man Boulevard, it could be anything from standalone commercial to mixed use development to office development, um, anything that kind of meets the need and can integrate well together within that space. It does have the advantage of their large parcel areas,
Hmm.
so you can really think more strategically about mixing uses in that type of setting. But it also allows for that organic transition to happen over time as well, and you already see that in that area. And I think the future vision just reinforces that opportunity is there, the groundwork is there, and as people make those decisions, we can work on just refining the interface between developments, to create what Midlanders expect, which is an attractive, vibrant area of the community.
All right, let me ask you about a little bit more controversial one. Not too bad, but the East Lawn Elementary School
Sure.
space has been sold and it's being developed. I believe this year it's starting, I think.
That's our understanding.
And this is being done by River Caddis, which is the same development company that did the downtown center city
The
building,
East End.
East End building.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I read in the newspaper they got a $31 million grant from the state of Michigan to help with the development costs,
Yep.
which blows my mind. It's very interesting. And I don't know if there was a pilot or any kind of tax incentive associated with that with the city.
There was.
Okay. And that was a little bit controversial because there's always
was.
two opinions when you have that
Yep.
kind of thing. I come from the development standpoint or the
Sure.
development perspective, certainly just because of my background. So
Yep.
my thinking is this space, we need more housing, we need more affordable housing. In order to provide that, the cost of construction is prohibitive in many cases.
Hmm.
And so without a subsidy of some sort, whether it be a state grant or a pilot from the city, those developments just won't happen. They won't, or they're very unlikely or more difficult financially to be feasible, right?
Absolutely. So that has traditionally been the reason why incentives are most often applied in the housing world for income controlled units.
Mm-hmm.
I think the city of Midlands had a very smart strategy over the last 20 plus years, which has focused on mixed income housing. So not concentrating, saying that all of this housing will be one income bracket, but really looking at how can we blend a variety of income brackets into one development. I think that's both good for the asset of that housing to have that flexibility
Mm-hmm.
as incomes and people change over time. There's really, as a planner, I've seen over my career, there's nothing worse than when people they work hard, they get a promotion and they get kicked out of their housing.
Mm-hmm.
And so by having a blend of incomes in the development, I think it gives people an opportunity to better themselves and not be forced into relocating, or vice versa, be forced to pass up that economic opportunity because they'll lose their housing and
Mm-hmm.
make that trade-off. Um, so that's really been our strategy. In this case, I think it's a uniquely difficult environment to do market-based housing. And we've heard that from our market-based builders, but it's impossible to build anything that is below market without some level of subsidy. In this case, I think what the city saw in this project is a opportunity to have a very high quality development with a developer that's already invested in Midland, that they've been tested. They do a great job of maintaining the building they have here. They have a strong track record in other communities that they own properties in. And they were willing to create a development project that fit within the context of that site. And so provides that mixed income that's in line with the neighborhood, is buffered from adjacent single family residential through some, flexible zoning that was applied to the site. And ultimately is going to help us to meet a small part of our housing demand. So it's 204 units. So it's a bigger opportunity for the community than we typically see to fulfill some of those gaps in our housing market, which is great. It's certainly not going to be sufficient to fill all of them,
Mm.
but it's going to help us to make more progress than we've made in a long time in filling some of those gaps.
How does that development compare to the new one that's just down the road on Jefferson? There's an apartment complex just built down there.
Yeah, so similar in terms of the financing structure. So that was also a project with a pilot. It's also a mixed income project. That's a developer that didn't have prior experience owning properties in Midland. Although I will say, in subsequent conversations since that development's open, they've really enjoyed working in and investing in Midland, and so they've
Mhm.
expressed some interest in potentially doing more projects here because of that experience. But similar financing structure, serving a similar population of people in Midland, and these are going to be by and large employed people in Midland working in essential careers within the community. People already in the community. This is just an opportunity to maybe level up into housing that better fits their needs, that's higher quality, safer, more energy efficient, closer to work. That's one of the great advantages of that area is in terms of walkability and access to employment. Jefferson and East Lawn is really the peak of Midland's potential in
Mm.
terms of walkability because of all the assets in that area.
Sure.
And so to be able to leverage those and to put residents in a location that will really suit their needs and their lifestyle is a great opportunity.
What about the east side of Waldo, just north of town? What's going on over there?
So north of US 10.
Yes.
Yeah. So that area. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Midland urban growth area, but the city of Midland has for several decades had a fairly unique for Michigan policy on growth and annexation. And so we've partnered over the last 30 years with our surrounding townships. We have agreements that allow for us to continue to grow as a city, continue to provide urban services to urban style development, and allow our surrounding townships to really focus on what townships do best, which is primarily providing the rural lifestyle that folks also sometimes choose. So in that area, we've had annexations over the last probably decade and a half from Midland Township. That's primarily north of Wackerly Streets or in the Midland Township area, and those are really positioned to provide a mix of housing and commercial and office, just like we hope to see in a lot of the other opportunity areas of the city. Out there, we're fortunate that it's largely common ownership by one family,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's, I think, an even greater than normal opportunity for really thoughtful, orderly development to take place. But we've been working on, as you know, there's Diamond View Farms on the other side of Waldo Avenue.
Yep.
That is a project, same ownership. meeting a really important housing segment in Midland that's really was undersupplied for a long time. That single level um, living, really attractive to older adults, but also really attractive to young families,
Mm-hmm.
has been wildly successful.
Mm-hmm.
They're in phase 3 now. And so I'd expect we're probably going to see some diversification of the housing that's provided out there, but I think housing's probably what we'll see next. And then over time, we've had conversations with MDOT and the Road Commission about the interchange at Waldo Avenue in US 10. There may be some opportunities there for potentially expanding that interchange to full service. I think that would open up some more commercial opportunities at the interchange than currently exist. But even short of that, Northeast Midland's not very well serviced by commercial opportunity. So I think even short of that interchange, we've got options there to provide better options for those residents.
All right, let's go down Bay City Road,
Bay
east
City
side
Road.
of town. Big building just got demolished. Big old tell.
Yeah.
What happened there?
So yeah, we seem to have a track record with hotels in Midland that it's not like many communities, and I don't know how to account for that. But I'll give all the credit to our city attorney's office and our city attorney Chris Kamara for working really diligently to remediate an unsafe condition there with that building that was demolished, and to do it in really record time to get that building down and that site restored. We are working with the owner of the property on options for redevelopment. We don't have anything formal in front of us yet, but with Costco there, the Aldi, that area is primed to be a really important part of Midland. There's lots of great opportunities out there, including that site. And so I would expect in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll continue to see things grow and change along that corridor.
All right, we spent most of this conversation on the east side of town, north side of town. What's going on the west side of town? Anything over there happening that's exciting, or not much? Perrin, Dublin, on the way out of town on Saginaw Road. Anything?
Yeah. So I mean, one of the things, just from a planning perspective about Midland, is the west side of town. We have a lot more sensitive ecology. So it's lower elevations. We've got more creeks and streams and drains. So it's a little bit more challenging over there to do intensive development. It's not necessarily appropriate on a lot of properties on that side of town, but it's nevertheless a very desirable place to live. You've got our largest employer in Midland, My Michigan Health, on the west side of town. It's a beautiful part of the community. And so we continue to see interest in projects, primarily residential as you move kind of north of US 10. There's still some opportunities there in that Midland urban growth area for annexation and new neighborhood development. And we do have some housing in the pipeline in that area. And then we continue to see interest in kind of redevelopment and growth along the North Saginaw Road corridor. So I think we'll continue to see some growth there, some new opportunities to service the residents of the west and northwest sides of Midland from that. And we're really focused on making sure as we do that it's done in a way that's sensitive to that environment.
What about downtown with the new farmers market? I saw the bridge going in.
Yeah, so we're really excited about the new bridge over the Tittabawassee River and that opportunity to interconnect with the great park space on the south side of the river, to provide a walking loop to the Tridge and to build on all the investment that's happened in the community at the East End with Dow Diamond, with the East End building. Just a tremendous amount of excitement down there. The kind of Eastern Main Street business districts getting investment with the Oddfellows building, redevelopment project, some of the great businesses on that end of Main Street. And so there's a lot of excitement from folks about that end of town. I think we'll continue to see with a potential new, improved farmers market facility somewhere in the east end of downtown. The Midland Business Alliance oversees that project. And so they were recently awarded a $1 million grant from the state to move that project forward. I think that's just going to be part of what they need to get that project fully funded and off the ground. But I think that farmers market's such an asset to Midland and to downtown. So the city's very excited to see it, an opportunity to keep it downtown and then to just keep the momentum going on that eastern end.
Where's the opportunity in Midland right now? Where is the need? What comes to mind when you're doing your meetings and you're thinking about your love of Midland, which I know you love?
I love Midland. I'm very, absolutely.
I admire that about you a lot. We both share that.
Absolutely.
We both love this town. So what would you like to see?
Well, one of the things I love about Midland is that I really see opportunity everywhere. So it's very hard to narrow down. And I really see as my role not to narrow people's opportunity, but to do what I can to expand it. Um, so I really try to listen. What do people want? What's in their business interest? I try to keep my ear to the ground to understand where businesses might be, aging out of the community, things are happening where there might be an underutilized property,
Hmm.
thinking strategically about what we already have. One of the things that my predecessor, Grant Marshall, I give him a lot of credit for helping people in Midland think about what we've already built and how do we leverage that investment
Hmm.
more than we have. And so that has made my job a lot easier because people already are bought into that concept. So when you think about downtown, you think about a South Saginaw road. You've got water and sewer in the ground, you've got roads there, and maybe you got a big parking lot that isn't needed, and it could be something else. And what could it be? And helping people think through those ideas and then make something happen. That's the most exciting part of my job, and that's the thing I probably love most about working in Midland is that not only do I look everywhere and see opportunity, but I also look everywhere and I see people that have that same mindset, that want to see great things happen, that are willing to pitch in and help out. And they're not doing it just for their own interests, but they're doing it to make the community better.
Jacob Kain, thanks for being on the Talk Midland
Hey,
podcast.
it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.